Okay, welcome to pao'oh Chimachtigan, translation meaning providing information via electronic source. It's a podcast series presented by Migration Music Festival. Migration Music Festival is a grassroots organization based in Mohkinstis, the Blackfoot work for Calgary. Migration aims to bring communities together to build relationships with Indigenous people, artists, and non-Indigenous people, and to reaffirm the significance of responsibility, sustainability, and reciprocity in all our relations, whether it be land or people. Today's podcast is the first in a four-part series presented through the support of the University of Calgary Itapidope Intercultural Capacity Building Grant. We are grateful to bring this podcast series to the University of Calgary community and wider Treaty 7 community. My name is Blaire Russell. My Blackfoot name is Pao'oh. I'm from the Lone Fighters clan of the Blood Tribe. And I'm very happy to be here with both of you. Holly?
Tanshe everyone, Holliston to Schnickocean. So hi, my name is Holliston. I do go by Holly for short, and my Blackfoot name is Soomaahka. And I am a staff member at the University of Calgary, and I work with the Cyber Mentor program at the Schulich School of Engineering, which we'll hear a little more about later on. I'm also an alumni of the University of Calgary with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and I also support migration with some administration work, and I'm happy to be here on this podcast today.
So the Offices of Indigenous Engagement and the Itapidope guide Calgary on its path of transformation and communicate its commitment and responsibility for truth and reconciliation. In a good way is a concept used by many Indigenous people to recognize work that is conducted in authentic and meaningful ways with intention and sincerity. Through reciprocal and respectful relationships, it is a demonstration of working with clear purpose and with high levels of integrity, moral strength, and communal spirit. The guiding principle for the Indigenous strategy starts with the commitment to work together with Indigenous communities in a good way. We are grateful for the support of the UCalgary Office of Indigenous Engagement and the opportunity that we have provided for migration to connect with the University of Calgary campus and community.
We also just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that additional support for today's podcast is being provided by the Cyber Mentor program. And Cyber Mentor offers online mentorship and outreach programs for youth who face barriers to accessing STEAM education. The mission of Cyber Mentor is to encourage young people interested in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math to pursue post-secondary education and also help to reduce barriers marginalized communities face when accessing STEAM programs. Cyber Mentor is currently in the process of expanding to offer outreach and mentorship programs for Indigenous youth in Alberta. For more information on Cyber Mentor, you can visit the website at cybermentor.ca or find them on social media at CyberMentor.
This podcast is being recorded in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in Southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of the Siksika, Piikani, and the Kainai First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3.
So just before we dive into meeting our guests and asking them a few questions about their experience in the STEAM fields, we wanted to provide a little bit of framing about what the STEAM field looks like for Indigenous people in this land that we are currently calling Canada. So according to information from the 2016 census, Indigenous people currently make up around 5% of the population of Canada, but we're seeing less than 2% of the people working in science, technology, engineering, and math occupations as Indigenous. So Indigenous people, as we know, have lived and thrived on this land for thousands and thousands of years, and we've always had our own ways of passing on knowledge, and we've been scientists on this land long before colonization and and the definitions of science as we see today. So when discussing STEAM and STEM, it's important to recognize that Western science tends to take a quantitative, compartmentalized approach to understanding nature, whereas Indigenous knowledge in science leans more toward a qualitative and interrelated approach. From my perspective, Indigenous science also has very distinct views about interconnectedness, relationships to space and time, structural authority, and ways of knowing and learning. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to actions, as well as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, both call for educational reform to ensure that Indigenous people and knowledge are accepted as equals in all fields, and that includes STEAM and STEM education. So investing to improve STEM education for Indigenous learners can be one way of addressing the education gaps that we as Indigenous people experience. There are many systemic barriers that stand in the way of Indigenous learners and can make it harder to get into STEAM and STEM fields. But we're so grateful to be joined today by two inspiring Indigenous STEM professionals who both live and work in Treaty 7, and they're here to discuss with us the importance of Indigenous knowledge and representation in the STEAM and STEM fields. So with that in mind, we'd like to get to know you a little bit, and we were wondering if you would take some time to introduce yourself to us, Nikita, and tell us a little bit about who you are and the work you do in STEAM fields.
For sure. Dansa, my name is Nikita Kahpeaysewat, Musamino Tsinia. I am from the Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. I recently moved here about 4 years ago to pursue an education in environmental science. I'm currently in my third year at Mount Royal University, and my focus has been primarily on water quality in Indigenous communities, because that is something that has directly affected me while I was growing up. I actually just got a notification from our chief that they're under another boil water advisory. So this is an ongoing issue that I feel hasn't fully been addressed, or we still don't understand what exactly is happening for our water quality to be the way it is. And so that's something that influenced me to take this degree program. And so that's what I use my social media platform for, is to educate others as well on not only culture, but I guess ongoing issues that we're still facing. And so I will pass it on to William and let him introduce himself. Thank you.
Okay, Nistawan ako ka Api soomaahka. Hello, my name is Achi. I am running Coyote. I try not to use my name it's a colonial term. So I use Nistowa, William Singer. I'm from the Blood Reserve. And well, my involvement in a lot of what we're going to talk about is basically, things that we're all born with. So things that we call required knowledge. So, and that's really lacking in a lot of our daily lives, and that's what contributes to a lot of the issues that we're having. Language, our health, our mental health, our wellness is really at stake. So for myself, my background, I'm an audiovisual technician, but I make my living as a illustrator. I have 40 years experience. But a lot of the work I've been doing lately is working with the land and understanding that, that we need to take care of it, that we are all stewards of the land, but, saying it is one thing, action is a whole different thing. So so what brought me into this, I'm devoting actually my whole life to the rest for this work, is like here on the reserve, like Nikita mentioned, they had problems with water. We have that every once in a while, but what we're having here is our grasslands, meaning that, our grasslands hold our traditional plants, and our grasslands are really being affected by invasive species, agriculture. So one of the things that's really showing, that's really apparent was this year, where there was a lack of sweetgrass on the reserve. So there was a lot of people who are coming to me and asking me, where can I find sweetgrass? So within the roughly last 2 years, we've lost 4 sweetgrass patches. So anyway, so I'll kind of jump ahead. So one of the things, reason why I'm doing this work is not only to educate our communities about our, our plants, our grasslands, because, they were here before us. And not only that, they offer, the benefits they give us. And that hopefully at some point, we'll be able to grow these plants in our own garden beds, our gardens and greenhouses. And that's the work that's I'm currently focusing on, because a lot of the methods I'm using, there's absolutely no Western methodology involved. And that's the focus of this work, and the work that I'm doing is that Western methodology is there. I've learned from it. And, with that process, we forgot about our Indigenous knowledge. And our Indigenous knowledge isn't really that hard to achieve. You don't have to go into a building to learn, you walk right out the door. That's your classroom. And, so for myself, that's what I like, to have people learn and understand to work outside. So my background, I said I was an audiovisual technician. And in 2001, I was pursuing a management degree at the University of Lethbridge. And anyways, something happened. I left the university because, I was wondering how I can best help my people. This is just my own opinion. This is no disrespect to any people or managers or coordinators. I've ever had those jobs. So I felt, how can I best help my people? And one of the things that clicked was our Indigenous knowledge. We need to retain that. So since that time, I've been out in the wild, learning, and I'm still out there to this day. And what I've learned out there has really changed my life, and it has changed other people's lives. So, and it involves what we're going to talk about, because it's important to know you have your Western methodology and you have your Indigenous knowledge. Each nation will define it as ecological knowledge. So here in Blackfoot territory, it's defined as Blackfoot ecological knowledge, because we have our own forms of Blackfoot science and physics. And that's what I work on today and to understand, because we need to know our Indigenous knowledge. So there's a whole lot of things that brought me to this point, but I'll end it there.
That's great. Thank you both so much for those introductions, and your discussion of, the Western methodology versus the Indigenous methodology is a great transition into the first question we wanted to ask you both today. So from my experience, the way STEAM topics have been taught to me in school always relied heavily or even solely on Eurocentric approaches to academia and scientific method. So what I was wondering is, from your perspectives, how would you describe, scientific method or communication, or even just science from that Indigenous worldview? So Nikita, if you wanted to provide some of your thoughts on that, that would be great.
For sure. So in my field of environmental science, I would say the biggest thing is the way we view it. So Western science. I didn't understand that. Whoops, sorry. Western
That's pretty
science.
funny. Siri doesn't understand Western science.
Yeah, they're listening to me right now. So Western science likes to look at things down to the smallest particle. Like, we have to know exactly how it works, or, we don't understand, or, we're not there yet. We don't understand how these processes or reactions occur. Therefore, we don't know this yet. But with Indigenous knowledge, it's like, no, we understand systems as a whole. We understand, the importance of keystone species, of being sustainable and how that affects everything else. We understand about being a part of the food chain, not above it, and how everything interacts with each other. So I would say the biggest difference is we don't need to understand everything down to the tiniest detail. We could see the whole picture. And I would say that's the biggest difference. And I feel like that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. It's because we know this knowledge, it was passed down and it's been proven. Like, we don't need to go out and do experiments to be like, oh yeah, this water is blah, blah, blah. You know, we already have that understanding. So I feel like that's where most of the conflict comes in.
Yeah, a little bit more focused on like the relationship with the knowledge and the interconnectedness than, needing to define every minute detail.
Exactly.
Awesome. William, did you have some, additional thoughts you wanted to provide on that Indigenous view of scientific method and science?
Yeah, it's a year ago, I started doing part-time work at the Kainai High School on the reserve. And what they asked me to teach was Blackfoot agriculture. There's no such thing as Blackfoot agriculture, and that's what I told them. All we we did was cultivate tobacco. So I told them, while all of this is being developed, but I told them I'm coming from a Western, not a non-Western perspective. So it was all Indigenous knowledge, and it was interesting because I was learning along the way how to deal with seeds, how to propagate them, especially our traditional plants. So how I approached the Indigenous knowledge is through stories. There's really no other way to approach this, because our stories have a connection to a lot of the science and physics that occur around us. So, for instance, when we were given the buffalo, there was a series of events that happened after that, where the creator told the people, this is what you do with the buffalo, this is how you eat it, this is how you're going to make a house with it, a home. So all of those methods, they were taught to women. So, all of them knew what they had to do. They even designed and developed the mitoyas, the teepee. So looking at that structure, simple as it is, but it shows you the science and physics that went into that. And that's what I would explain. I would use that. There is a whole lot of other things, that we can talk about. I find that at the high school level, from middle school to high school level, it's more accepted than as opposed to post-secondary. I've done some lessons at the Red Crow College, a few of them, and I've really got questioned of where I'm coming from. And well, of course, I'm coming from the Indigenous perspective, and that's really not well known because it's not written, but it's all around us, and that's the understanding that needs to be known. So because a lot of the, when you really get down to like decolonizing yourself, it really changes your beliefs. That system you believe in, it really becomes it's a non-issue, because when you really look at our what we're talking about, Indigenous knowledge is older than Western method, Western knowledge. So it deserves a place in this world, but it's not recognized because it's not written. But the power of this is the mind. We still have it in us to pass it on without books. And that's what's really awesome about Indigenous knowledge. It's your mind, it's the power of it. And that's what it's when you're trying to explain something completely opposite or different from Western methodology, especially when you talk about the creation of the Niitsitapi or the peoples on this Turtle Island. Like, a lot of people think, what? There was a beginning here, and it's older than, and that's where I get questioned, because nobody knows. Nobody really takes that time to just dig right back into the past. Because how we tell our stories and how I begin to tell our stories about STEAM, all the stuff we're going to talk about, is I start with the stars. And that's where we come from. We're all the same. And the stars tell us the stories because they used to be here on this world. So that's that connection. And that's the approach I use when I teach. Well, anyone that wants to know. You won't really hear anything Western from me anymore. It's all Indigenous knowledge. If you come visit me, you won't hear, there'll be no TV on, radio, we'll be just visiting. And that's how we should be, always to visit and talk. But with, even this isn't too bad. But, I was looking forward to getting out.
That's so beautiful, though. I feel like nowadays, it's hard for a lot of people to turn off that television or put that phone down and just engage in that conversation. But that's so important for, knowledge transference and hearing those stories.
So, which brings us to our next question. So in recent years, we've seen the transition from the acronym STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, and math, to STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. From our understanding, the inclusion of the arts, which would include the humanities, language arts, dance, drama, music, visual arts, design, new media, you name it, is to focus on the intersection between STEM and the arts, and seeks to eliminate the boundary that we so commonly see between science and the arts. So what are your thoughts on the STEM versus STEAM acronym? And do you think that the inclusion of arts is important when looking at Indigenous approaches to STEM? Nikita, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I was reading this question and I was thinking about it for so long, and I'm like, you can't have science without art. Like they're intertwined. And the example that I could think of right away was the Mayans. So for the longest time, they had what we stapled as pictograms, I believe, and we considered it art. But what they found out is from these pictograms, they can go back and say, oh, this happened around this time, because they recorded great events that happened during those times. But really, it was actually a calendar. And when you're talking about calendars, you're talking about math. So it's really just, I guess, perception. But from my point of view, we are very visual, I guess, oral learners. And so we need that art incorporated within our science. And yeah, that's what I came up with.
William, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Nikita answered it, like how can you not have art, in there? Because that's the whole art of doing everything. It's a part of life, even the way you dress, it's art. So for me, it's, that's all I can say, so.
Yeah, no, it's always made sense to me, which is why I always prefer to use the acronym STEAM in my work. So I think we can all agree that there's, a definite need for equal and more inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and perspectives in STEAM. And in particular, I'd love to see more youth being encouraged to pursue STEAM education and careers. So I guess one of my questions for the two of you is, based on your experience and your work in the community, is what considerations do you think are important for, whether it be programs or academic institutes, whether it's grade schools or post-secondary institutes? What do you think are important considerations for them when working toward engaging Indigenous youth in pursuing STEAM careers? We'll pass this one to you first, William.
Oh, okay. Well, one of the things, well, first of all, like to introduce that is to go out onto the land, because a lot of like everything that is within STEM or STEAM, like it's all based out on the land. It comes from the land. So a lot of it, a lot of the work that I do is all land-based learning. So I bring out students to look at the different plants and sort of the various uses of the plants, how they help you, with your well-being. There's just a lot of different things, and the science behind them, how to grow them is something new. Like that's what we're learning here on with the Blackfoot. We're actually learning how to be an agricultural people, because we never were. So that in itself is a lot of the work. So everything I do is, well, yeah, everything like I work with is based on the land, but I also use PowerPoint, things like that. But really, that's where it starts, because I've always consulted elders in everything that I do, and that's one of the things they'll say, well, so means outside. That's where it's at. So and it doesn't take long to it snaps back in this, because for myself, I spent 7 years in residential school, so I'm a product of that system. Prior to going into that system, I already knew all of this stuff. I was raised with it. I knew a lot about the plants that, some of the plants are used for medicine, the ones you can eat. And in residential school, they never allowed you to go out on the land to do that. So, even with that, it kind of goes with their language where, a lot of things are trying to be stopped. And residential school was the place where a lot of damage was done. So for myself, I break a lot of walls down because, those ones that were created by the system and colonialism. And that's something that, is like I'm working on, and with, and it's good that, we start with the younger generation. In the next few weeks, I'll be working with the Apukats in Early Intervention Society. They're based out of Lethbridge, and they have school. It's a school. It's also a daycare. So what they want to do is they want to develop lessons, like what we're talking about for that age group, and that's the perfect time, because that's when you were taught at that age. So, and that's something they want to do, and that's something that I'm developing right now. So it's just, once you get students involved and you get them hands-on, you've got their attention. And that's the thing that my approach. So, that's being out on the land is, that's the place to go. So that's where, one of the places I go.
So I guess a follow-up question to that would be, in situations where, maybe it's an urban setting and it's a little bit more challenging to get out onto the land, how can academic institutions look to bring the land into the classroom? Or is that possible?
For me? Yeah,
for you.
Actually, it is possible. We've, with the Kana High School, we started some plants last year. We were successful in a few of them, but there are some that we're working on that are actually really beneficial for everyone to grow. And that one of them is Indian breadroot, or it's known as the wild turnip. Blackfoot, we call it mahs, and that's like a superfood. So I've been trying to propagate them for the past 2 years, and I haven't had any luck. So one of the reasons of that is the thing I learned about our plants, they're not the same, our seeds, they're not the same as hybrid seeds. Hybrid seeds used to be heirloom seeds, and that's what seeds I work with, heritage seeds. So it's easy to propagate hybrid, not so easy for heirloom. Especially our plants. I've done a lot of different methods from freezing, but a lot of them need to be frozen. So these are, it's just, but it's possible because we were successful, and we're going to be doing that again this year. So if anyone's interested, I'll have seeds available next year. So if you want to grow wild mint, if you want to grow sweetgrass, if you want to grow wild bergamot, sage, wild onions, these foods help you. Wild onions, they help your sinus. If you eat them in a high concentration in the form of a tea, they'll clean out your system. And if you have any bugs or parasites, So all of them help you, especially with the turnip plant. Like I said, that's a superfood. It can, it can help people with diabetes, in people with cancer. So, and that's, once I can figure out how to, crack its code, then you will be able to, have others grow it. But right now, there's a few other plants that are like that. So it's just a lot of research. But yeah, it's possible.
That's amazing. And I will definitely be hitting you up for some seeds because those are all things I would like to grow. So Nikita, I'll pass the question over to you. And just as a refresher, it was, what sort of considerations do you think are important when programs or institutions are seeking to engage more Indigenous youth in pursuing STEAM careers and also have improved representation of Indigenous knowledge in these fields?
Yeah, I completely agree with you about land-based learning. I just know that my experience going into STEAM has been a really rough transition just because Western education lacks that spiritual component where you're connected to the knowledge that you're learning. And so it's more about just sitting there and memorizing things and knowing rules. Whereas if you're going out on the land, you're physically doing something and you're learning as you go. And so I feel like that's, I don't want to repeat anything, but yeah, that's exactly where I feel that we could do. I do see the complications with like urban settings, and something that my professor has done is he's created, well, not him, well, he hired somebody to create virtual reality. I think it was through Google. And so when we weren't able to go out, we just spent a class like actually walking around and seeing plants. And, even though we're not physically there, it's the next best thing when you can't go outside or you don't have that kind of access.
I love that. And I definitely think that COVID has pushed us to, be a little bit more creative in how we can, bring things online when we don't have that accessibility to meet together or meet outdoors. William, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I forgot to also answer part of the question is there are places in the city of Calgary where you can find some of these plants park along the river, so they're there, not in abundance, but they're there. So yeah.
So our next question is more geared towards for William. William, you were in an article recently in the Narwhal where it looked at the importance of the native grasslands. So for over 150 years, development farming and agriculture have decimated nearly 75 to 90% of native grasslands in Canada, and have endangered species such as the swift fox. Now, what can be done at a community, provincial and federal level to mitigate these effects going forward and to recover like previous damage that has been done from like this development and farming and agriculture? And what steps could be taken individually to help save our grasslands and encourage sustainability?
Well, one of the important things, well, the most important thing about saving our grasslands is that they were here before us. They're older than us, and what they do for us is they sustain us. They sustain everything in this life. So in the early days in our history, it was well known that we subsisted on plants, berries, roots, and shrubs for thousands and thousands of years prior to the creation of the buffalo. And that in itself, that's what's our connection. That's what connects us to this land, and it's really important to know that because like I harvest a lot of plants, I use them, and I always want to do things the right way. So like I mentioned earlier, I consult the elders a lot. And they're the ones who, you know, like the questions I ask them and they tell me, like, what are you talking about? You know, like, what do you mean? You know, and because these are questions that have never been asked, you know, so they're just now being asked. So for me, it's important, like for everyone, you know, like Indigenous or non-native, non-Indigenous in this country, like it affects all of us. You know, we're all affected for this. But you know, what we're working at is in our communities here on the res, and it's really, I can really see there's a lot of changes going on. So, but for me, it's the connection, and it's really hard to kind of to say how we can, if we can restore land back to its former state. It's almost nearly impossible, but it is possible with time and working with the land. So one of the things that one of the groups I volunteer with, I'm a part of, is KIPA, Kainai Ecosystem Protection Association. And our goal is to educate the community. So we have these sessions every year that we talk, bring out people out on the land. We show them what's happening. You know, we let them know what they can do to help, and that they need to understand. You know, yeah, you know, you use this plant, you know, but there's these other plants that other people use. But you know, we need to start limiting how we use these plants because we're getting to decimate them. So one of the things that was really interesting that we 2 years ago we told the community to start cutting their plants, the sweetgrass, to cut them at the base, and also with mint, sage. So a lot of the community are doing that. So although that's going on right now, the other thing that I've sort of found out is that the sweetgrass, they're not seeding. So there's just, you know, a lot of things, you know, that it's really an overload. You know, you tell somebody all of this, you tell them our sweetgrass is disappearing, our sage, our mint. Not only that, all of our different types of animals, all, you know, in decline. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, I talk to a lot of elders because this really, you know, there's a lot of grief involved when you see the damage, you know, ecologically. Like it's just, and it's hard to deal with. Well, I shouldn't say hard to deal with, but it's something I've learned to deal with because it's all about education. It's not too late, you know. So for me, it's always that, and for the last part of the question is you mentioned what steps can be taken individually. So I'll try to make this short because, you know, what I talk about is there's just a whole bunch of, it's like a tree, but so about 11 years ago, I began to notice a decline in our plants, mainly sweetgrass. And I started telling elders about it. I started talking to our elected officials, our chief. And within that year, I was told, well, why don't you do it? You're going around telling people this is happening. You seem to know what's happening. You seem to have a handle of how to address it. So you do it. So I thought about it, knowing that this is going to take a long time. It's not something you can do in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So by joining groups like the Kainai Ecosystem Protection Association, the Old Man Watershed Council, that gave me more of a voice for others to hear. So since that time, you know, we've got a lot of the tribe involved in a lot of the projects. I mentioned earlier that we've got some of the teachings that are going to be happening in the school system. And it's just all based on our required knowledge. And I mentioned earlier, I get a lot of people telling me, where do you get off talking like that? Who taught you to, who told you, you know, it's required knowledge. We all should know it. And that's the other wall that I'm always constantly breaking down. So it's not really an easy road that I'm currently on, because we need to. We're actually working right now. We've been working on teaching like Blackfoot ecological knowledge, and it's just this. It's exactly the same as STEAM, but it's Indigenous knowledge. So it's not the opposite. It's the same, but it's different mindsets. So, and that's what we're talking about, because the kind of Ecosystem Protection Association, our mandate is to educate, and our goal is to become an institute. So that's a place where you can learn a lot of these things, and be a part to save our language and everything, because it involves everything. So for me, it involves a lot of my time. It's something I'm going to do to the day I die. It's something I can't walk away from, because when you talk about Indigenous knowledge, it's you, it's in your blood. You can't, there's no way you can shed it until the day you die. But so for me, all of the work that's being done, that I'm doing, is for my people, for you yourselves, because that's what we are. We help each other by our knowledge. But with these times right now, climate change, we have to adapt again. And that's the awesome thing about, the neat stuff, all the Indigenous, the First Nations, we adapt. We've never gave up or anything. We constantly adapt, and this is just one of them. And it's just having the world adapt to our knowledge. And that's the tough thing, because it's not written.
I love that you mentioned adaptability, because I've always found that, we as Indigenous people are, very resilient and can adapt to anything and everything that's been thrown our way. And one of the things that I love about the work you do, Nikita, is that I feel like you've found creative ways to incorporate social media into that education piece for encouraging, youth to learn more about that intersection between STEAM and culture. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about how you use social media to share your work, and the kind of like the impact it has, or the reactions you get from community about, sharing the work that you do through those social media platforms.
For sure. So about 8 years ago, I started my journey on Instagram with the intent that I was going to build a platform where I could share my experience as an Indigenous person, because at that time, I was not seeing that representation online. And so it was content that I wanted to create. And originally I started doing makeup. And that led me to YouTube. So I started to do makeup videos, and then eventually that led to pao'oh videos, because one of the things us women like to do is get ready for pao'oh. We like to do all the makeup, the hair, and it's sort of like this healing in a way where you get to be creative. You get to tell stories just through visually, and that was kind of what started my platform on social media. And then as I got into science, I'm like, okay, well, they seem to be engaged when I talk about culture. So let's start adding in what I'm learning, and kind of it's just been like a lot of trial and error. It's like I'll put it out there, and if I get a lot of good reactions, then it's okay. These people really want to learn about Indigenous culture, or I try not to share too much, because a lot of things are sacred, and I try to give them an idea of what I'm talking about without giving away too much, because that's something I feel like we need to be protecting as well. Um, and so right now, it's been focused on powwow, because I'm a powwow dancer. I dance women's traditional. I've been dancing since I was 8 years old, and I like to storytell about how I have obtained a lot of my regalia, my travels, the things I have learned, and it's really helped me get through a lot of my experiences. And so it's just something I'd like to share with people. And if they like it, great. And if they don't, then that's okay. Like, nobody's gonna like everything you say. So yeah.
Well, I love your social media accounts, and I definitely think it's always, nice to be scrolling through a social media feed and see an inspiring Indigenous role model who,
Mhm.
is showcasing the different aspects of their life. You showcase a variety of, areas that you're passionate about and involved in, and I love that inclusion of, you're passionate about science in there too.
Mhm.
So just to take our conversation back to the university campus a little bit. So we talked earlier about how, there are ways to, bring that land into the classroom and to get creative with that. And one of the things that I've seen at the University of Calgary, since the implementation of the Indigenous strategy, is that the university has been consulting Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders more regularly in various decisions around campus, but recently there's been more consultation in terms of architectural development on campus. And I shared with you both a little bit about, how when they did a renovation around one of the buildings, they created a patch that they're attempting to bring back that natural grassland and prairie roots so that there is that opportunity on campus to, go and see those natural plants. So what I wanted to ask the both of you is, what are some ways that you think the university could continue to recognize and incorporate Indigenous STEAM knowledge during campus development, whether that be, course development, architectural, landscape, re-envisioning the whole campus, whatever ideas you might have. So I'll pass that one to you first, William. Oh, you are on mute still, William.
Okay. A year ago, I was invited to a meeting at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. And this was in their their culinary department. I forget the name of it, but one of the chefs approached me and asked me a question of, like they know of, well, he wanted to know where does traditional food come from? And is there anything that's around here on the land that, I know this is kind of funny, but anyways, so I asked him, Tom, so what, Tom, so what's, why are you asking me these questions? He says, well, I'm a chef at SAIT, and we just finished another semester, and they realized that a lot of their students, even them, do not know where their food comes from. So like even the wild food. So what they had asked me was to develop a first-year culinary program for them. So and that will also include traditional garden plants, of the plants they want to also use in their culinary department. So they wanted, so it actually never really went anywhere because there was no funding for it. And I think a lot of it is, I guess, like the funding part, because knowledge, especially acquiring it from an elder, it's not cheap, because it's valuable knowledge. So a lot of it is that, and I guess a little more understanding of that connection, of a school and the outside environment, because they need to be connected and break those walls down. So a lot more, learning from the land will be good, because there's thousands and thousands of stories and lessons that you can learn from the land. So just a quick story, So you guys are in Mohkinstsis, Calgary. Okay, so Mohkinstsis is your elbow. But what you guys don't, what you actually are sitting on is a chief's face. So the city of Calgary is basically the face of this chief. His nose is Nose Hill. His headdress is in the Kananaskis area. And Kananaskis is actually pronounced Gananags, many chiefs. So then when you go down, his body comprises of the Porcupine Hills, extends down to the Sweet Pine or Sweetgrass Hills. So so those are our parents, and that's the stories that I was told. So when you talk about the land, there are people, so there's everywhere. You cannot walk anywhere here without tripping over a teepee ring, or no kidding, they're everywhere. So, and that's the thing, is to bring that, more of that knowledge into that, well, any classroom.
And Nikita, how about yourself as a current university student? What do you think, not just the University of Calgary, but campuses in general could be doing to incorporate more Indigenous knowledge into campus development?
So I briefly worked at U of C this summer, and I've gotten to know a little bit of their policies. And what I found is that they're very similar to MRU in the sense of policies that kind of create barriers for knowledge keepers or elders as well. Policies that, kind of state that they can't hire unless you have a PhD, unless you have a master's degree. And so just right off the gate, starting there, they're already gatekeeping on the type of knowledge that they're trying to bring in. So I believe that we need to start looking at those kind of racist policies and, how does this affect other people? This is a very colonized way of looking at education, and we need to start there because a lot of people I've learned from when it comes to more traditional knowledge, a lot of them didn't finish high school. That could have been due to like residential school, poverty, a bunch of other factors that kind of contribute them, but their knowledge, whether that's in plants or land or medicine or healing, it's like past PhD, like they're beyond experts. And I feel like that type of knowledge needs to be recognized and brought in. And, when we're bringing in these people, we should be hiring them full time. They should be permanent. They should have a permanent position. Like that to me states that the university or the institution is serious about including Indigenous voices, is when we're offering Indigenous people permanent places within the university. So I believe just starting there and kind of working out would be a great way to start.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry. Our last question here is, what advice would you give to Indigenous youth seeking to pursue STEAM education in post-secondary or STEAM careers? William?
I'm actually doing that. I'm encouraging a lot of our young people to get careers outside in on the environmental area, because that's where a lot of the work is going to be done. So for instance, here on the reserve, we've basically sucked it dry of oil, and those oil wells will have to be dismantled, and the grass will have to be reclaimed. So this is an opportunity for an individuals, even the tribe, to get into that, because it's a really good for any tribe to concentrate on their land aside from like oil, because like oil, there's really the state of the world today, like we need to move on. So I always tell our younger people, get educated, go out on the land, get jobs that bring you out there, because that's where it's at. And the best way to start is to start with your elders. While you're at school, visit your elders and build up your knowledge. And that's something that I'm encouraging, because for myself, I'm not going to live forever. Someone's got to take over. So when that's the whole point of the work I'm doing, is it's actually for others, not really for myself. it's for others that can do, you know, do the work, carry it on. Because like I said, that's what it's about.
Thank you, William. Nikita, do you have anything to add to that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no. What advice would you give to Indigenous youth seeking to pursue like STEAM education in post-secondary or STEAM careers?
Yeah, I think about my own experience coming in and the amount of barriers that were there for me. And, you know, first was in high school, I did not do that well because I was really focused on just getting through and just surviving. And so my mentality at that time was I don't care what grades I get as long as I'm passing. And so I feel like that is something that's common when we're trying to survive whatever environment we're in. And so when it came to after high school and I started applying to places, I was getting a lot of denials because my GPA wasn't competitive. And a lot of pretty much all the universities I applied for did not want me. I couldn't even get into open studies. And so right there, that is a barrier. And I used to live in Saskatchewan. And so the way they set up their upgrading is a little different than the way Alberta does. So Alberta has it within the university. I'm not sure if Saskatchewan changed theirs, but at the time you had to go through a high school or maybe a college. And then that directly links to financial. How are you going to pay for school? Once you get in, getting in is just like the start. So you start looking at all these, I guess, systems, and you're like, okay, I got to fill in a lot of these check marks. Like, how do I do that? And I start thinking about, you know, people who have lived on the reserve their whole life and how, you know, moving away was something like I had to do. And I needed a support system when I first moved here because I didn't know anybody. So there's so much factors in play, and I'm not trying to like be negative, but I'm realistic that it is very difficult in my experience. It was, and even just being in the program now, I'm still struggling to, I guess, perform up to par with the rest of the class, you know, like it's something ongoing. But you know, if you really want this and you value it, that will help you get through the hard times, because there's going to be a lot of hard times in university, just by the things that we have to face, especially if you move away. But that reward is there. It's, you know, I'm in my third year and I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, okay, I'm getting closer and closer and closer. I just got to check these off and I'll get there. And so, you know, I would say the best advice I can give is have that support system. You know, you're gonna need your people. You're gonna need a community of people to survive. I just think as Indigenous people, that's something that we're born into. We're not meant to be individuals, really. We're not meant to just be selfish. We have to think about the community. And so having that established wherever you live is, I would say, one of the first things you should get working on. And so I've been very lucky to have family here in Treaty 7. And so that's what's helped me get through it is, you know, just having that support system, just to vent to somebody, to go visit, to introduce me to their family, you know, just to have that laugh and to be surrounded by your people. And so I would say that's the best advice is seek that system, because there's going to be so much that you face as an Indigenous science student. And so your foundation needs to be strong.
Awesome, thank you for that. I guess at this time, I'd like to thank William and Nikita for joining us today's podcast. You know, really thank you for your time to connect with our guests, and we really appreciate you sharing your experiences and knowledge with us, and for the work that you do in the STEAM community. For more information about the upcoming migration music for more information about upcoming Migration Music Festival events, including the next podcast in the podcast series, follow us on social media at Migration Music on Instagram and Facebook, and check out our website at migrationmusic.ca. Thank you again to the University of Calgary Office of Indigenous Engagement for their support in making this podcast series possible through the Adapto Intercultural Capacity Building Grant. Thank you to the Cyber Mentor program at the Schulich School of Engineering for their additional support for this podcast on Indigenous knowledge in STEAM. We'd also like to thank Bread and Butter Club for their support with our marketing and advertising. And Sika Pinaki Lohorn for creating our fabulous image that you see on our poster. And a special thank you to Amber Clark Wesley, another member of the migration team, for all of her hard work in coordinating, making this podcast series possible. Before we wrap up the podcast, we would just like to ask William and Nikita if they have any projects or initiatives that they'd like to share or recommend to our listeners. We'd start with you, William.
Okay. Well, there's one thing that I haven't done yet is to have a presence on the internet. So I'll be putting together a blog, hopefully by Christmas. And with that, you'll be able to follow the work that's going on, the work that I'm doing, and also with the kind of ecosystem protection association. I just I lost my train of thought. Well, one of the things that look, I've learned is, like knowledge is like its power. You don't hold it. Like what Nikita says, you'll be selfish with it. And for me, and anyone like I said, if you ever want to know anything about our history or anything, like you can talk to me. I'm always learning. And but one thing I've failed to mention is the project that I'm working on. I don't know if I did yet, but the work I'm doing out here at my place, it's called the Napi's Garden and Katuyis Sea Project. And it took a while to come up with that name because it involves our land and it involves a lot of education and learning from the past. So an interesting thing that, is I mentioned that Napi was a trickster. And in the old days, he did a lot of things to, while he was a trickster, he created changes to the land, what we would call climate event changes, changed a lot of people. There was all sorts of strange things here on, the territory when he left. So Katuyis was created. Katuyis is, in Blackfoot is blood clot. Katuyis was created after the Napi era. So if you want to, kind of get down to numbers, the pre-Napi, well, the Napi era was about roughly 10,000 years. The era of Katuyis was roughly about 2,000 years. So that's the amount of time he spent cleaning the territory, ridding it of all the bad things, changing all of these climate event things that were happening because they did exist. And one of them was called a vacuum monster. It was sort of a type of a wind that was terrorizing the territory. So that was so when Katuyis was doing that, he went to the territory doing that, and he had a dog, and his dog was actually a puppy, and a Blackfoot name for a puppy is Sisum. So Katuyis and Sisum went to the territory, battling, creating good, making this territory, try to make it back to what it once was. And that's the education I talk about, because this is the work that, we're doing. We're doing the work of Katuyis, and we're learning from the past, which means the mistakes that Napi did. So it's just always involves stories, So, yeah.
Thank you. Nikita, would you like anything to share? Anything?
Yeah, so I recently just launched my website. It's nikitaalise.com. And one of the important things when I was launching this website was to have a resource tab. Because one of the things I do get asked a lot on social media is, I want to learn more. I'm not Indigenous, but I want to educate myself. And so me and Victoria Marchbank, who helped me design the website, we created a resource page if you're wanting to self-educate on history of this country or what it means to be on Indigenous land. I also have a tab for climate change, and any upcoming projects I have will be under there. And then my last one is on anti-racism and what you can do as an ally and how you can help amplify our voices. So that's going to be at nikitaalise.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for both of your time and your knowledge and sharing your experience with us this evening. Stay tuned for our next episode that is scheduled to be released in December, focusing on Indigenous literature. So once again, thank you so much, William and Nikita, and thank you to our viewers for joining us tonight. We will see you all. And Holly, you want to say bye?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo those thanks. We really appreciate you sharing your time and knowledge with us, and we hope that everybody got something out of this podcast episode and tunes into our upcoming ones. Thanks, and have a great evening.
Kiramatsu.